Hello, I'm Jonathan Kirschner, founder and CEO of AIIR Consulting. This is a podcast about leadership. I've been looking forward to this podcast for about 6 months. We have with us Dr. Michael Platt. I'll just start with a few small things Michael's up to. So Michael is a professor in 3 schools at the University of Pennsylvania, the School of Medicine, Wharton, obviously, and the School of Arts and Sciences. What not everyone knows is that Michael is also a founder, an entrepreneur,
Yes.
a venture capitalist,
Now.
father,
Yes.
sports enthusiast, fitness enthusiast, researcher of many things, including monkeys, which we'll get into.
Ooh, okay.
And really, I'll just say, like, a very important person in my life, somebody who has taken my interest in neuroscience and psychology and deepened it in such a incredible way. And so I thank you for that inspiration and for all the influence you've had on my own thinking, Michael.
Well, Jonathan, it's great to be here. I consider you a good friend as well as a colleague. I think we've probably known each other for all going on 10 years, not quite 10 years.
It's feeling like we're rubbing up on a decade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And AIIR Consulting has been, I think, the oldest continuous partner of Wharton Neuroscience, the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative that I founded in direct. And so we've had these amazing continuing interactions, and you and your company has shaped a lot of our thinking, a lot of what we do as we've moved more and more into leadership and HR and management, expanding the scope of the application of neuroscience across business.
Well, it's an amazing opportunity to dive deep into some of these like incredible topics of neuroscience and leadership. Maybe we could just start, Michael. Can you give us like how in the heck did you arrive at this place? Like, why neuroscience? Bring us on the journey of like how you got here.
Well, that when I was 10, I thought I want to be, a professor in 3 schools. No, I didn't. It's a miracle that I'm here. I mean, I think it's really quite extraordinary. And, I do think it's the kind of thing that, happens here, in America, that, I see, the promise that each and every individual can, be, who they want to be and who they can be if they work hard enough. But, so I grew up working class. My dad was a mechanic. My mom drove a school bus. Her parents were, grocers, and her brothers were grocers. So working class family. I was the first kid to go to college in the very large extended family.
Wow.
I won the lottery and went to Yale, remarkably enough. I mean, I was an athlete, and I guess that helped. Went to Yale, and the expectation...
Where did you play? You football?
Football. I mean, I played baseball, and I wrestled some, but football was
the most friendly game to the brain.
Well, that's why I ended up out of football, because I had so many concussions.
Oh.
And, when I was a kid, that was just called getting your bell rung, and like literally, your parents would laugh, "Oh, you got your bell rung." But, when I got to college, I ended up, I was supposed to play for Yale, and then I go to practices, and then they're fitting me for a helmet, and they say, "How many concussions have you had?" And well, what's a concussion? Well, did you ever
And you had your bell rung,
knocked out on the field? And when I told them, they said, "Well, no, you're not playing anymore." So that was a disappointment for me. Then I ended up getting many more concussions after that, but that's another story. But anyway, so I go to Yale, and I first gen college kid, so the expectation was you're going to do something practical. So become an engineer, or go into medicine. And I took an anthropology class freshman year, first semester, and I just fell in love with it. I realized that, wow, this field, which is really broad, it's the broadest lens through which you could try to understand human nature.
Study of people,
but in the richness of not just culture, but and language and linguistics, but really importantly for me, biology and our biological heritage. So, paleoanthropology, and also understanding the nature of our closest living relatives, which figures in, my life very heavily, primates. And so I ended up becoming an anthropology major, really just digging into that. And between junior and senior year of college, I won a scholarship, in essence, from the National Science Foundation to go on a field expedition, which was in southern Mexico in the jungle with a bunch of other college students, to study macaques. We were living on an island, and it was really an extraordinary experience. And I met the woman who would later become my wife, and also
She was also on that same
she was also on
expedition.
that expedition.
Wow, that's so cool.
So we met then. So that was a long time ago. That was 1988, actually.
Way.
You might not
All
have
right.
been alive.
No, I
But
was
but
collecting baseball cards.
yeah, so it was, it's quite an extraordinary, when you're out there in the middle of nowhere, it's like, kind of magic can happen. So, after that, I was, senior year, I was like, oh, you're supposed to start looking for a job. And then I learned, wow, you can actually get a PhD in this same field. And, if you're lucky enough, you can win scholarships, et cetera, to pay for it. And so I did not want to go to work. In fact, my dad said, because he had, he'd been under the hood of a car for, since he was 17, basically. And he said, don't start working until you absolutely have to, because you'll be working the rest of your life. So if you have an opportunity to study, keep studying. And so I said, that's really good advice. So I came here to Penn to do my PhD in anthropology, to work with just amazing mentors, Robert Seyfarth and Dorothy Cheney, who were lifelong mentors. They were famous for really developing sophisticated ways to understand what monkeys know about their worlds, in particular their social worlds. And so I came here, I did some field work in Venezuela, and then eventually did my thesis in a lab because I needed to bring in some control to the work I was doing, trying to understand how different species of monkeys represent their environment. So what they know about where food is and how long they can remember that and things like that. So, okay, so long story, not really, it is a long story, but as I was doing that, I realized, if I really want to understand human nature, I have to go to the brain. This is insufficient. I'm making inferences about what's happening in the brain based on behavior, but it's not enough. So I made this crazy career move. I went to NYU to do a postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience.
That was before neuroscience was cool.
It was starting to become kind of cool. But it was quite you can imagine somebody who'd done field work and, this was like a new level of challenge. I had to take the first year PhD curriculum in neuroscience so I could actually learn something about the brain while simultaneously setting up the lab. It was a new lab. My mentor, Paul Glimcher, was really profoundly important in my life. And I knew nothing about neuroscience. And so what was interesting is that I came there at the promise, we had a pact that basically I would be able to do the experiment that I finally just published a year and a half ago, some like almost 30 years later. But it was like, I want to understand how the brain actually makes sense of our social worlds. And so I want to be able to record from neurons across the brain, that are involved in encoding information about others and understanding the meaning of their behavior, and then, planning, making decisions and acting accordingly, appropriately, adaptively. And he said, yes, but first you have to learn neuroscience. And so you're going to have to do this really boring stuff for like 3 years, which was true. I had to study eye movements. And, because it's a really simple system and we knew a lot. We had a really good sketch of how the visual system works, and also a really good sketch of how the output of moving your eyes works. Cause it's really simple. It's just, there's 6 muscles and that's it. Unlike, the arm, which is super complicated. So I did that. And while I'm doing it, I'm like super bored. And, but doing neuroscience, which was awesome. But I was thinking, what I want to study is decision-making. People are starting to study decision-making in neuroscience, but the decisions they're studying, and this is still really important work, are what seem to me not the most important decisions. So like, is the light bright or dim? Is it, red or green? That's important when you're coming up to a traffic light, but in general, it's really the decisions that matter to us are the ones about things we value, right?
Mhm.
Anything from like eat the apple or the donut, to, who do you marry this person, or you continue shopping, you put your money in stocks or bonds. And that had not really been considered at all in neuroscience. And so I was sort of ignorant enough to say, well, why don't we go to the people who've really kind of figured out on the outside, like the math, around that. That's
Mhm.
economics, basically. And so I said, well, why don't we study how value, right, and utility are computed in the brain, and and then shaped the decisions that we make. And so that was, by some measures, a paper we published in Nature in 1999 was considered the first paper in the field of neuroeconomics. There was other work, absolutely critically important, but
Mhm.
that was sort of the beginnings of that.
Wow.
And then you see, like, over the next, like, the mentions of the word value or even reward or decision were basically almost zero in neuroscience, and then it
And then
became
it picks
exponential.
up.
So then, and it was interesting because, at that time, we couldn't get funded for it. Everybody thought, well, this is really out there. This is crazy. Why don't you do something that's, a little bit more incremental? But we published that paper. And so then I go on the job market, kind of softly, and, probably ended up, applied for 100 jobs, who knows? But I got one job offer. Turns out, you only need one. You just got to make the best of it. And it was a great place. So I went to Duke,
Okay.
joined the neurobiology department, which was in the School of Medicine, which was also a new adventure for me, because now my job was to think about clinical conditions. I had to teach clinical neuroanatomy to first-year medical students. I had never done that before. I ended up running the first-year medical school course in neuroscience, after a few years. But that was also really important for me because I had never really thought about the sort of human health side of neuroscience and brain function and dysfunction, and that has carried through with me to today as well. So I was at Duke for a while. I had a taste for building things. I didn't know that I did, so I co-founded the Center for Neuroeconomics at Duke, and then became director of the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience, which was an interdisciplinary, interschool kind of department.
Mhm.
And then ultimately ended up directing the Institute for Brain Sciences, which was Duke's way of doing interdisciplinary scholarship. So these institutes were ways to get resources into the hands of kind of people who knew the local, the local community and could put people together in interesting ways. So it was a joint project of the medical school and the rest of the university. And my job was not only to connect the neuroscientists who were across schools to
Mhm.
each other, but also to everything else. And that was what was really exciting, because now we're bringing neuroscience into contact with business, law, humanities, arts. Started a Center for Neurohumanities there also. So then that starts to get really interesting, and we weren't telling them like, oh, we're going to solve all your issues, but no, let's have a dialogue, because we are all wrestling with the same thing, right? Which is human nature. And, there's just different ways that neuroscience can be helpful, I think, in all those domains. So that kind of put me then on the path to where I am now. And, I liked to build things back then, and I was starting to kind of be like, I don't know, people are thinking, oh, maybe you'll be a dean or something. And then I got this amazing call from Penn.
Wow.
It was, president calls me up and says, I want to give you your dream job. What would it take? And I said, well, and they said, well, we have this vision of you not only in the medical school, but at Wharton. And I'm like, wow, that's a signal, right? That
Mm.
the School of Business believes that the future of business, education, practice, a big part of that is going to be neuroscience, right? And so I said, yeah, I'll do that, but I also need to be in psychology too. So 3 times the faculty meetings. But so I came here and then, started this center in essence, which is Wharton Neuroscience Initiative. And our mission is really to use the insights, the technology, the analytics of neuroscience and apply that to all things business. So you can think about it as like making business more efficient, effective, and humane. And really, it's about performance. So how can we help you and you and you, reach your full potential? And how can we help teams to do that? How can we help businesses to do that? How can we help society to do that? And that's, I think, really kind of the thread that runs through all of that. And I think that we have, over the last not quite 10 years, shown that that's possible.
That's incredible. Wow, that's a hell of a journey. So from football to anthropology to early days neuroscience at NYU, did your time doing some brain tracking, getting the foundations of the brain, and then getting into decision making, neuroeconomics. Monkeys, I guess, have been a through thread.
Absolutely.
But you did just write. Well, you wrote this book. This is now the updated version, The Leader's Brain.
Second edition.
And I note the word leader. You've been really interested in leadership in particular, and so I've got curiosity around that. Like, what's so compelling about that specific lane among the field of lanes that you could choose?
Well, I think we've all had the experience of, good leaders and bad leaders, and that leaders make a difference in our lives. This is something that we, I don't know that I would say that monkeys have leaders per se, but there's sort of a distribution of power that, influences their societies, and, ours is a little bit different. But think about it this way, and I think that's why, in this book, I think is interesting, because I added a new chapter as well as a lot of other stuff, but leading in the age of AI. And think about it this way, technology is accelerating. Human evolution is not. So leadership, I believe, can and should close that gap, right? So it's, incumbent upon leaders to help people to, especially right now, navigate the uncertainty, the volatility, the onslaught of information and disinformation and misinformation, the anxiety that comes along with that, as we kind of confront a pace of change and magnitude of change that really is not, that we're not wired.
So technology is accelerating at a pace that far exceeds the evolutionary movement of.
So let me put it even more concretely. This thing up here, right, hasn't changed in 200,000 years.
Well, not even incrementally?
Very basically, no. And in fact, it has changed very little in 35 million years, and maybe even more than that. So we last shared a common ancestor with, monkeys, was around then. And half my time I study monkeys and how the monkey brain works, because it's a microcosm, if you will, for our own brains. We have all the same brain areas wired up in the same way, doing the same stuff.
But for the most part, it hasn't.
No,
it's remained pretty
200,000 years
over time.
When our species, Homo sapiens appeared on this planet, which we generally believe was around 200,000 years ago, with full-blown language, most likely. It's not really changed at all.
Maybe some regions are like slightly bigger, slightly smaller.
That would be hard to know, because the traditional way of doing that would be to look at what are called endocasts, which is kind of you find an old skull, and then you can, make a mold on the inside, but that's just going to show you where some of the bigger bumps and grooves are, not something that's very, very specific. Right? So there may be, in terms of evolution, right, there would have to be changes in the brain, even at a microstructural level or circuit level, that are heritable, they have a genetic component,
Mhm.
and that would differentially affect the representation in subsequent generations, right? So if it's something that helped you to do a little bit better than your competitor,
Mhm.
and there was a genetic component to that, then, and you had more offspring than they did, then,
It
then
would get passed
theoretically
down
it
and
gets passed down. That's how evolution works. So I don't know that we have any real evidence for that, and it's a really short period of time
Mhm.
for for evolution to have occurred. Although there are various traits that have changed, in a really short period of time, like lactose tolerance in adulthood,
Mhm.
is really found in people from Northern Europe, right, where dairying cultures first emerged, but otherwise, not. And
That's
that's about 8,000 years, maybe tops. So, but that's a minor
That's minor. It's not
range.
like structural brain
Right.
evolution.
Right. And I think that what's been much more profound, and this is kind of very obvious, I think, is that culture, once it emerged, of our sort of human culture, aided by language in terms of transmission, operates so much more rapidly than biological evolution. So you get
Huh.
cultural changes in technology,
Mhm.
going from really rather crude stone tools and just a few, to a profusion of, I'm talking about 30,000 years ago or so, where suddenly, people are making, arrows and fish hooks and all kinds of things, where, up till then, for a million years, we basically had one
Like a big
major,
rock,
it was like
like
an
a bat.
Acheulean hand axe, these
Yeah,
beautiful, symmetric,
and that was it.
pretty much it. I mean, you'd have some choppers and things, but that was it. And that was actually, I love this example because this hand axe, which started out relatively crude when they first appeared, and by the time a million years later, they were really refined, really quite beautiful, stunning. And what's amazing is, like, everybody had one. It was like the iPhone. It was sort of a status symbol. They were beautiful and elegant, and you use it to a whole bunch of different things. So it's
People did put it like they embellish it, and make it their own
yeah, I mean, and people be buried, when
with
buried
their
first. Yeah,
their stone
yeah,
axe.
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So it's kind of it's a cool thing.
But there's a turning point in which somebody figured out, we can make
You
a
can
fish hook
suddenly
or
make all kinds
an
of,
arrow,
yeah, all
and
kinds of things. We have no idea how or why,
yeah,
that
it's
that
fascinating.
happened, and we're learning more and more from the archaeology. Uh,
That's
you're
fascinating.
it's subject to what's preserved, which is,
But
chance.
it's a good example of, I mean, in some ways, right now, we see, we see these inflection points in time where there's incremental changes. There's times of total stable, um, you know, stasis in some regards, with regard to innovation. And then something just like happens, and there's just this like boom
Yeah,
of innovation. Like,
right.
we're in that right now with
We
AI,
certainly
obviously,
are.
right? And then that would have been, analogous. That would have been a time analogous to what we are experiencing now, in theory. Um, but to your point, the brain is relatively stable over these
Yeah, that's right.
200,000
That's right.
years or so, or
Right.
200,000.
Let's just say 200,000.
Let's say 200,000 years.
Yeah.
Whereas the sort of evolution of culture and technology,
There you can see it. I mean, and it's cumulative, right? So what, the technological innovations of, your parents or whatever, you get to have them right away. And then you can amplify and embellish and create and innovate from that. So you can see that is, kind of a flywheel ratchet effect.
incredible.
And, as we go, you see these major inflection points, as you were saying. So people settling down, staying in one place, developing agriculture, different kinds of materials going from, bronze to steel, et cetera. And then, of course, the industrial revolution, which is what a lot of people are comparing AI to. I think it's far beyond that, but, it remains to be seen.
So leadership is um, it's that's the thing. What do we, want to refer to it as? The variable that bridges the gap between?
Well, I'm arguing that it has to be.
It has to be. Okay.
It has to be.
It doesn't just happen, right?
Leadership, whether it happens. I mean, it's a really interesting question. I mean, there is a thing, called emergent leadership that just an individual, other people around them identify.
Like somebody just steps up.
So yeah, somebody steps up, or somebody is sort of volunteered because, and we don't really understand how this works, that kind of collectively or individually people see something in. That's one reason why I'm also interested. It's another, older reason to me, or, earlier reason to me why my interest in leadership is that kind of ineffable quality, when you recognize somebody who's a leader, even if they're quiet, there's somebody's got something, right? It's
like an X factor.
It's an X factor. I mean, that's like charisma, for example, which I've always been fascinated by, which is a component. It's often something that helps someone be a really great leader, because it's that, what is it? It's presence. It's these are all words that we don't really understand biologically what they mean, but they've got presence. They people respect them. People follow them, and for good or bad, right? People have those qualities, and so anyway. So in this book, it's a distillation of a number of. I don't think it's comprehensive, but focusing on what I consider to be some key elements of leadership. Importantly, perhaps most importantly, sort of leading with the social brain, and that has been a focus of my work for decades.
Yeah.
So social brain, I think, more critical now than ever. It's a foundation of a healthy, mentally healthy life. So you creating the conditions in a culture, which you've done at AIIR. A great leader, it starts at the top, and you create a culture, and you also model behavior that that's open and empathetic, and a clear communicator, somebody who can take the perspective of others, and then create a culture or conditions where that is broadly valued, right? And it's that's so that people really can work together and achieve more than they could achieve on their own. And so I think that's the foundation. That's a big foundation for leadership, and it's what I think characterizes or distinguishes, really good organizations, effective organizations, from those that aren't. And that's, we can talk about sports and how I think that is a.
I would. I mean, I definitely want to dig into. I'm really interested in like team effectiveness, and like why do some teams, like you could have a team that is composed of all-star individuals and they totally fail.
Yeah.
And you could have a team composed of like some all-stars, some mediocre, some even poor performers, and somehow that team like comes together and wins.
Yep.
I'm very curious about that. But just stepping back for a moment, define like social brain. Like, why is that? What is it, and why is it so important?
So one thing I want to kind of just dispel any notions of our brains being computers. They're really not computers, although we're seeing that there's some interesting parallels between AI, large language models, and the way that brains seem to.
It would be easy to come to that conclusion because a computer has memory and processing, and it pumps out an output. So true to the brain.
People have talked about brains using that metaphor for a long time.
Okay,
it's the hardware, and then language made.
So why are we not computers?
It's much more like a Swiss Army knife.
Okay,
so you have specific tools that do specific jobs. So you'll have a knife and a nail file, a corkscrew, which is really important to me. And honestly, those tools in the Swiss Army knife have been around for 35 million years at least. And so there are the ones in humans are going to be a little bit bigger or sharper compared to the ones in monkeys, for example. And the social brain or social brain network is one of those tools. So it turns out, and this is a real discovery of the last maybe 15 years, maybe going on more, but a real discovery in neuroscience, which is that there is this system in our heads for that his job is basically to manage our interactions with other people as well as our long-term relationships. So it's this network that, when you are, basically what it does is when you walk into a room, or when I, walked in here before and I saw you, what happens is the pixelated data that's coming in through my eyes from my retina, right, is the whole scene gets broken down into pixels, it gets reassembled in the back of your head. And then that information kind of flows forward. And the first step in the social brain network is just identifying, creating an image and identifying there's a person there. Right?
Human.
There's a human there.
Jonathan.
And there's,
I like Jonathan.
Familiar. Yeah.
I give Jonathan a hug.
Exactly. That's exactly how it is. So yeah. Are they familiar, unfamiliar? And that information flows forward in the social brain network, being informed by, if you do know that person, by previous interactions with them, or maybe information about reputation, et cetera.
So we're dipping into the hippocampus,
well,
right? Your memory bank
plays a role. I mean, that's not where memories live.
Oh, interesting.
That's sort of that's the thing that like takes the information that is going to get stored, and then it puts it elsewhere in the brain. So
where does it go?
Well, it kind of goes all over.
Different some memories.
Yeah, it's distributed in the parts of the brain that would process it in the first place. If it's like so-called face cortex, or the part of the social brain, is where information about that is stored about other people, like what they look like. So this social brain network, as the information's coming in, and there's information about what you're hearing, maybe touch, smell, and so it kind of breaks into two pathways, and one is a little bit, you can think of it as being a little bit, it's just a little bit lower in the brain, and it's going to go to more emotional centers of the social brain network, so that are involved in decoding what another individual is experiencing based on
like
lot
what
of nonverbal cues,
Yeah.
so facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, all those kinds of things. We have these dozens of muscles of facial expression, and the only reason we have them is to tell somebody else's brain what we're feeling or thinking, or what we're paying attention to. That's the only reason they're there. So anyway, those areas are what's the source of empathy and kind of understanding when another person needs or wants, or what they've learned from like tasting a something that might be bad for you, and the more activity you have in a couple of those areas, like the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula buried under here, that predicts like your likelihood of helping somebody, and generally how empathetic you are. So that's one pathway, and they're interacting. And there's another pathway you can think of as more cognitive or mental, and it's doing the other part of the equation, which is trying to figure out, it forms a mental model of another person's mental state. So it's like mind reading. So it is decoding or making inferences about what that person finds important from, for example, what they're paying attention to, where they're looking, their general disposition, are they trustworthy or not, especially if you've interacted with them in the past. It allows you to make better predictions about what they're likely to do. So that's going to guide your behavior. Those two streams come together eventually to shape, now this is where we get back to decision making, shape the calculation of value or utility signals, which is happening a little bit down here. And it's those value utility signals that then inform the choice that we make. So do I approach you and hug you? Or do I, stand back and go, whoa, no thanks? Do I negotiate fairly with you, or do I cheat, in our negotiation? Do I bluff you in poker? That kind of thing. And then the system is really smart, so it learns from every decision, every action you engage in. So there's a forecast about what's going to happen based on what did I do, and how you would respond. And then the difference between what your brain forecasts will happen, what it predicts, and what actually happens, that error signal, that difference, is fed back into the whole system, so that hopefully it's a teaching signal that then updates it, and hopefully it'll work better next time. So if you make a faux pas, in an interact, then you hopefully learn from that. Now, not everybody does learn. as there are differences, and that's another. I'm talking about the average, average human brain, average human social brain network, and of course, there's variation amongst people. So, some people are better at reading social cues than other people. Some people are more motivated to, you call them extroverts, right? But it's not really the terminology we use in neuroscience, but it's they're more engaged, more motivated to be with other people, and some people less so. I'm not putting a value judgment on that at all. That variation is there presumably for a reason.
Okay.
And we could talk about that too. That's where the monkey work, I think, is informative.
So the social brain network, would you think of that as one of the various myriad of tools on a Swiss Army knife, or is that sort of more like an operating system that the tools live on?
I think those two things you can't really separate. So I would just say that it is a tool. It's a tool, one of the really
important
tools that
It's not the tweezers or the
No, it's really important. And we have other tools, for example, for like thinking outside the box and exploration and innovation. Decision making, you can kind of think of as a tool that's in there. So that's how it's all set up, and the various basically what I do in the book is examine a few of these tools, make the case for why they're important for leadership, such as decision making, for example, and then try to tell you how it works, and in a sense, like for decision making, this is really important. Why do we care about how the brain makes decisions? You might just say, "Oh, we don't care." I mean, that's what economists said when people first started neuroeconomics and studying decision making. Like, well, we don't really care. All we need to do is predict people's behavior. We don't care what's going on inside. Well, it turns out that knowing that is really important because it defines the rules that the brain lives by. Right? There's certain constraints. There's certain limitations on the way brains process information that turn out to be really important for decision making, that are the source of many biases and the source of the mistakes that we often make. Right. So if you want to make better decisions, wouldn't it seems smart to understand those so that you can navigate those issues in a more effective way.
Yeah, totally. Coming back to, I keep hammering on social brain because
favorite topic.
It seems so vital. You said something earlier that really struck me, like that that this is what allows us to get things done together that we would otherwise not be able to do alone. I'm thinking about, like what's the so what behind the social brain network? Would you say that that's like the primary so what, that it essentially?
There's many so whats. So we are, I mean, I make this point all the time. We're wired to connect. When we don't have connection, we fall apart. And we're seeing that, more and more and more, particularly in young people.
Like, if you're super smart, super biologically healthy, but if you do not have sort of interpersonal contact,
correct,
like you just
you literally
deteriorate.
Yeah, I mean, people who are lonely, people who lack social connection, it's really bad for your health. It's bad for your mental health. That generally increases anxiety and depression, etc. But it's bad for your physical health too. We now know. So lacking connection and feeling lonely, which is the gap between the social interactions you want to have and the ones that you're having, there are a variety of reasons why that might happen. That's worse for your health than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
Holy smokes. Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, the epidemiological data is really clear on this, and honestly, it just kind of keeps getting worse because, and we can talk about why that might be so, but societies are becoming more and more fragmented, obviously polarized, but people are just less social, especially here in the United States. They go out less, they interact less with people outside the home. They are less likely to belong to community organizations, to go to church or synagogue or mosque. All these.
Well, there's an irony because I might have like several thousand LinkedIn connections and Facebook connections and this and that, and yet I may not have plans with anybody tonight and may feel moderately, if not more depressed, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a distinction, right? There's a difference there between, I mean, our brains are designed by evolution for IRL.
In real life.
In real
Yeah.
life, 3 dimensions with another human being, right? And we saw this painfully in COVID, right? Suddenly, overnight, you're told you got to go lock yourself in your house. We've got these great tools now, video conferencing.
Yeah.
But wow, what a difference that is, right? So there's so many reasons why that just falls short.
Mhm.
But the basic reason is that our brains are designed for this physical reality.
just in
Where you
person.
stick somebody, you squash them flat in 2 dimensions in a tiny little box on a screen, where you can't see their eyes really, and there are a whole bunch of them there, so that fragments your attention. And it's no wonder that, you have Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue or whatnot, because your brain has to work so much harder, and it is just not the same thing.
So is there like a social brain crisis going on right now, or like the possibility of that when you think about like,
Yeah.
our increasingly digitized lives and
Yeah.
the more time we're spending on using AI rather than like a human teacher
Well,
or
that's the next level. I mean, I think that, the first AI, I'm not the one who came up with this, but the very crude AI that was unleashed on the human species was smartphones and social media.
interesting.
Which is, social media is, built on algorithms that are designed based on how our brains, assign value to things. But it basically, it's reinforcement. It's the same thing as like going to a casino and, getting the
Right.
occasional win. And there's lots of,
Wow.
bells and whistles going off. And it also takes advantage of our social brains because we're wired to look for information about others, to learn about others, to value reinforcement, social reinforcement. I mean, that can substitute for other kinds of rewards that are necessary for life, like food and water and, et cetera. I mean, we showed that a long time ago in our monkey work. And it's because it's so important to, to our lives. So kind of to get back to your question, the why, the so what. First of all, it's critical for our health.
Physical,
Just
mental.
being with others, and so social support. And again, the monkeys have told us a lot about this, really powerfully. But also, as you were discussing, there's power in what we can do together that we couldn't do alone. But only so for the collective intelligence of a group, and collective innovative abilities, et cetera. There's so much potential there.
Mhm.
And the challenge is like actually creating the conditions under which that can work. That's the chemistry part, right? Team chemistry. It doesn't necessarily happen all the time. We've all been there,
Mhm.
whether you're playing sports or you're, in the office working on a team where it's like, wow, this is just going off the rails, or there's something wrong here and we can't figure it out and we're not playing well together. And
We're in a
when
rut.
it's the opposite,
Yeah.
when it's like sudden, it's like magic, right?
It's flow state.
It's flow. I mean, we
You don't
saw that.
even like attend to the effort because it's just happening. It's
No, you just see
unfolding.
it in teams that are amazing. Like we just saw with our amazing men's and women's, USA hockey teams, with the men's team in particular, not favored.
Canada was a way better team.
Way
If you
better
took the sum of parts,
Absolutely.
way
Way
better.
better. Way better. As you know, you're a hockey
Yeah.
player. But a way better team. But somehow, the American team just that night, had that, right? And we could talk about why that might be so. But it was such a reminder, whatever it was 46 years ago to the
Mhm.
week. I was 13 years old in 1980
Like
when
Placid.
Lake Placid, and that was so the USA men's hockey team beating the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was the best.
It's almost this identical.
It was kind of like Rocky
situation.
IV. It was like because it was the Soviet Union, not Russia, but it was like these guys were all professionals, essentially supported by the state. They had all the best training, all the best everything, and the U.S. team was college players, recruited whatever just a couple of months before the Olympics. Had to put them together and somehow get them to work together, and develop chemistry really rapidly with the, I think the premise was quite clear, was that they may be, they may be a team of better players, but if we're the better team, we could beat them, right? If we have that trust, that if we perspective taking, we know, where everybody's going to be, this sort of like anticipation and being able to be in that flow state.
Well, let's unpack. I actually want to double click because, you mentioned like ultimately performance is a really important piece of your research and something that motivates you to continue to delve deeper and deeper into all these different topics. And when we think about team performance, so you mentioned like perspective taking, chemistry, which feels kind of, woo-woo. Like, I'd like to understand what's happening really. Like, what is chemistry really?
Yeah.
Perspective taking, trust, that also feels kind of soft. Like, just help me. Like, why would a team outperform or underperform based on what's happening in the brain and maybe even like social brain networks specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think the why do they prevail, right, is still a question that, I don't know that we have an answer for, in the sense of like, well, like when you feel like you have psychological momentum, but I think that there's I could discuss, we could talk about the things that seem to be associated with that. Like there's a joy in playing together, that's part of that flow state, right?
And then be like a rewarding. That would
It's
be like
rewarding. It's joy.
Like, I
There's
want more of that.
something collective, right? Something about doing things together that feels like it's bigger. It's more than you alone. And it's that we know this sense of purpose and drive, especially when you're doing that for other people, that is really, really motivating, right? And so players may go you put in that bit of extra effort, really take that risk. And also I think sacrifice. So it's the sacrifice part, like, okay, I'm going to actually pass it because I know he's going to make that shot. Right.
Yeah.
So, which is a really hard thing to do sometimes, right? You want
It's less
your
glamorous,
own
passing
glory, your own
Yeah.
self-glory, right? And think about somebody like a goalie who's got to they're literally putting their body on the line, to stop these pucks that are coming 100 miles an hour.
Not for me. Yeah.
So,
but the ultimate like self-sacrifice position, right?
Yeah. So what I can say that we now know, and this is something we're investigating and other people are, which is that when those conditions are met, chemistry, that is associated with something that we call synchrony.
Okay.
Interpersonal brain synchrony, physiological synchrony, which first really discussed in dyads, pairs of people. So when you have a great relationship with somebody, when you finish, it could be your friend, your partner, whatever, even coworker, kind of when you finish each other's sentences and you really just click. That click, what that is associated with, what that means is that actually your brains are resonating together. And I don't mean in some non-physical sense. I mean, although we don't know everything about how this works, but when you have that kind of rapport, what happens is your brains you have similar patterns of activity in both of your brains. So that means that you're kind of like seeing or perceiving the world more similarly. You're feeling more similar.
This is totally unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, but I think it is that, that sense.
But biologically measurable?
Yes. So, but I'll give you, it can become conscious in the sense of like when you had that experience, when you're in for me, like going to an Eagles game and, and you stand up and you sing the national anthem, and the jets fly over and you just have this, your hair stands up on the back of your neck and it's like, I don't have any, but it's, but that feeling of like, why do you go do things like, you can watch it on TV. It's much more comfortable. But there's something different about having that experience together. And so
it's an awe-inspiring moment. You can't even describe it. It's ineffable.
It's ineffable. So that's brain synchrony. So, and when our brains align, it turns out that this percolates down to our bodies too. So our hearts will beat together, we breathe together, we move together, we start to orient our attention together, which reinforces, it's like a feedback loop, right? And then critically, you can kind of run this in reverse by moving together or breathing together. This is why, a lot of chemistry building exercises involve, moving together, singing together, chanting together. So basically all these rhythmic activities, every human culture has them, whether it's dance or drumming or singing, they have all these, right? Those are synchrony building technologies. So, and I believe that is every culture has them because, when evolution hit upon that, or cultural evolution, whatever, that creates the glue that keeps us together so that we're not acting selfishly, right? Because it's a tension, right? There is a tension between acting in your own self-interest and kind of acting for the good of the group. And it's this synchrony that is the glue. And we've shown that in a number of different studies, and that it goes well beyond just two individuals. It's teams. When teams' hearts are beating together, they can accomplish more difficult tasks. They can use all the information that's available. We believe that when our hearts are beating together in sync, this is what psychological safety is. People have been talking about psychological safety for decades, right?
Yeah.
But not knowing what it is biologically.
But
right?
biologically, it is essentially
Being in sync with each other.
neurosynchrony.
It's neurosynchrony. Absolutely. So that's, so in this one study, which we published a year and a half ago, and it was a business type situation, although, it was still an experiment, but we had teams of like 6 people. We had hundreds of them, and, or hundreds of them. And we gave them this really hard challenge, which they had to evaluate candidates to hire.
Okay.
Hit one candidate out of a pool of candidates. So they get this really lengthy resume. And so there's a lot of detail, and we distribute information asymmetrically, so they don't know that. So a couple of people or one person, they might have a little bit extra information on the resume that actually turns out to be critical. So without that, you kind of run to the default, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire the woman who went to Harvard. But it might turn out that there's actually a problem with that individual. So in order to get it right, make the right hire, everybody has to participate. So number one, right? So everybody's got to be engaged. You have to feel safe enough, in a sense, and confident enough to voice your opinion, to introduce information into the discussion. You have to recognize something that everybody else doesn't know, which is pretty sophisticated social inference, right? And the group has to have the capability to have a real robust discussion. It's not like one person's dominating, or some people feel too timid or shy to participate, or they've not been drawn out, right? There is a leader, in there, even an emergent leader, not named as the leader. So that, in order to get it right, you got to get all that to happen, right? And it turns out that if your hearts are in sync, then you get it right most of the time. And if they're not, then you get it wrong.
And you were able to actually measure this.
Yeah. There's no heart rate monitors.
So you have the heart rate monitors on the various team members.
Correct.
And the teams that sort of like outperformed on this task essentially had greater synchrony together.
Exactly.
So it wasn't a function of like, this is the most intelligent team and that's why they got it right.
No, and what was in this was also really, I think, important, and look, and I'll make the case that everything we do meets this test, passes this test. So their own self-reported rating of how much psychological safety there was on the team, or their sense and their ability to report the conditions of that committee did not predict.
Did not.
So it's the biology predicts it, but
their own self-perception didn't.
No, and that's where, I think the applied, that's why neuroscience also is super important in application.
It tells the truth.
Business. I always say, if you want to know the truth, ask the brain directly. We can do that now. In marketing, it's super clear basically, the standard approach is to ask people, well, how much did you like it? How much would you be willing to pay for that? Did you remember that ad? What did you remember?
Traditional market research.
Yeah, and that is going to explain somewhere between 0 and 8% of the variance out of sample in what everybody in the market does. The brain data, just collected passively, so you don't have to interrupt people to ask them questions, right? Which changes their responses. There's often bias in there because of like, I'm being asked questions about this for some reason. I don't want to look psychotic or whatever. So the brain data is going to predict, in our hands and in other people's hands, anywhere between like 70 and even 90% of the behavior of millions of people in terms of like everything from click-throughs to sales. And we've got some really sophisticated stuff going on now where we can predict like changes in stock prices as a function of ad spend. I mean, it's pretty, when you step back, it's pretty breathtaking and revolutionary. I mean, I would have said 20 years ago when I, first getting into this stuff, it was like, no way. We could predict maybe what one person would do based on their own brain activity, but to take brain activity now from just a handful of people, let's say 20, and predict what millions of people will do. Now think about the ways in which you could use that. You can use that, that's like everything from A/B testing, but on steroids. Right? It makes your process so much more efficient and scalable, and it allows you to iterate. And you can do, honestly, the entire process from, design, creative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now like lather, rinse, and repeat for management. Like, okay, fitness for role. Like, how do you know who to hire for which role? And then how do you close the gap between, where their skills are now and what they need to do? Again, neuroscience does that much more effectively than traditional ways, like a Myers-Briggs test or something like that, which is only marginally more, better predictive than astrology.
Well, that one in particular, yeah.
That's an Adam Grant.
Yeah, that's that. No, that's fascinating. So I'm curious to what extent neurosynchrony, the team getting in sync, is a function of a great leader stepping in and saying, guys, let's come together and setting the tone, or is it something that sort of emerges more naturally? Like, does leadership play a role in determining whether a group becomes synced?
Yeah, I believe so. That is still a work in progress. We do know from a couple of studies that people's followers' brains tend to sync onto a leader's brain, which is pretty interesting and kind of what you would expect. Why and how does that happen? It's still emerging, but let's kind of back up a sense and talk about like one of the most effective ways to get in sync with someone is actually through an authentic conversation. So give and take in being authentic, being a bit vulnerable, even. We and other scientists have worked with this every year around Valentine's Day, in the media, you'll hear about the 36 questions to fall in love, right?
Yeah.
And that's a legit exercise. It's not so much for falling in love, but it's about breaking down barriers and becoming close to people. And my colleague and friend Emily Falk here at the Annenberg School showed that when people are working through this, and we've done this exercise before.
Is this the fast friends?
Yeah.
Fast friends.
So, but it is a way to.
It's probably why we're so close.
Stimulate and promote a real, authentic conversation. It's like telling your story, right? And so, as you do that, people's brains, they may start out very far apart, right, in terms of their activation with the pattern of activity. And as you work through it, they come closer and closer together. And there are some interesting dynamics around like how well you know each other, et cetera. But in general, having a conversation like that closes the gap. And there are other ways of kind of stimulating that to happen through even like briefly saying, just like me, this person has experienced pain, suffering, et cetera. Or meditating on that person's humanity. So there are a lot of ancient practices, right? Kind of loving kindness meditation, etc., that that close that gap, that get you more in sync. So in terms of leadership, one thing I think a leader can do is get everybody in sync and get them in sync with them, right? So it turns out that, like, for example, when there's a really beautiful study done by my friend Uri Hassan, who's at Princeton. This was done, I don't know, 15 years ago or more. And he's one of the pioneers in studying neurosynchrony. Yeah. And he had this great study where he had two groups of participants, who were going to go in the MRI machines and scan their brains. And everybody's going to hear the same story. It's called Pretty Mouth and Green My Eyes by J.D. Salinger. And it's a short story. And there's two ways to kind of interpret it. One is that, and it's this story about a couple, they go to a party in New York City and they somehow lose track of each other. The husband goes home and his wife's not there. And he calls his friend up to ask if he's seen her. And like, there's a woman in the background. And so there's two ways to think about it. One is like the husband's needlessly jealous. There's nothing going on. Or his wife's having an affair with his best friend. And so what Uri did in this study was for the two groups, give them different prompts, like needlessly jealous or wife's having an affair. So now when you look at brain activity, patterns of brain activity in the two groups, everybody who had the wife's having an affair, their brains were all basically synchronized. They looked exactly the same, and it was totally different from the people who were primed with husband's needlessly jealous. So
fascinating.
So now think about a charismatic leader, somebody, when you get up there to, you're addressing your audience, addressing your team, essentially your job is to get them in sync with each other and with you. When they're in sync, that is a predictor of, that they're going to process information, more similarly. They're going to hear what you're saying and act on it. They're going to be more likely to do it.
More probable to carry out the vision of the leader
than if they're not. So, and, each day everybody shows up a little differently, even if they're, part of the same team, like a bad drive to work, or I didn't sleep well, or, you won the lottery this morning. So everybody's brains are in a different state. And so if the leader can get everybody synchronized with each other and with them, they're going to have a much higher likelihood of achieving their objectives. And that's, I believe, why really effective speakers, right, are, or really effective leaders are often really, they should be really great communicators. That's how you get everybody in sync. And I don't know that I'm such a great speaker in terms of doing that, but my shortcut, the sort of poor man's synchrony builder, is to tell a really bad joke. So at the beginning of every class, I tell some really bad science joke, and everybody either laughs or groans. They typically groan, but they're groaning together. They're groaning together, and they hear each other groaning together because now they're all locked in. They're like, "Oh, brilliant! We all feel the same way," and they're emotionally synchronized at that moment. And they're paying attention and they're engaged.
It's fascinating to think about these things we take for granted and think of it as like tactics for speaking, or just, you got to be a little more humorous, or you got to, enhance your storytelling. But really what you're doing is you're enhancing the synchrony of the audience.
Yeah, that's right.
You're speaking to.
That's right.
What are like some imagine there are like some neuro hacks that you could share with a leader who's looking to improve their capacity to get their teams synced.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you got to make time, right? Time and space for them to actually talk with each other.
Yeah.
So if you go in and you're like, let's just get right down to work, you're missing that, probably really crucial few moments to build synchrony so that people can more effectively.
And you think you're being like,
listen,
hey, we got to focus on performance, not the soft stuff, but actually by getting to know each other, that enhances performance.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And this is, I was telling you earlier, we've been working with PwC on a primer, a guide for helping boards, which are tasked with like really challenging,
couple of big decisions.
Yeah. And typically they're not together, they're meeting whatever quarterly or maybe twice a year or something. So there's this sense that like, we just got to get right down to work and you start executing, but then they're not taking that time to have a bit of authentic conversation, communication, which either establishes or reestablishes the synchrony that will enable them to, be able to process information better, to make sure they're all engaged, that they're not distracted. So I would say, there's a number of things here. There's like, create the conditions for that time, make time and space, right? Model that. So you
model the behavior itself.
Model the behavior itself, because that's contagious as well from our social brain.
Everybody's looking up to the leader and sort of
exactly,
mimicking in some ways.
In some way they don't know it. It's subconscious, but it is contagious.
Emulating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys make time and space, model the behavior, make eye contact. That actually is the first step in when you're face to face with something, that begins to synchronize your brain activity.
Really?
While you're making eye contact. Yeah. So think about then.
Why would somebody have resistance to making eye contact?
Well, there are a variety of reasons. I mean, there are differences amongst people. People with social anxiety, for example, it's harder to make eye contact. There are some cultural differences, but in general, we make eye contact, as humans. People on the autism spectrum typically or often don't make eye contact. And the reasons why are probably, there are different reasons why, because it's a spectrum, right? But so those are some of the reasons. But I think also what's happening now, we talked about this experiment that's been run on, the youth of the world, beginning around 2010 with the introduction of smartphones and then social media shortly thereafter, is that, and look, this is like the work of Jonathan Haidt and Gene Twangy and other people, that now when you got this, and now you're staring at your phone, it fractures attention. Now I'm not paying attention to the thing that normally would be the most important thing in my world, which is the other person that I'm here with. And especially if that's happening during adolescence, which is a critical period for developing social and emotional skills. So just think of it, I think this is not just a metaphor, that, these tools in the Swiss Army knife, right? They're kind of like muscles, or you can think of it as like, you can sharpen them or dull them. If you're not sharpening them, they're going to get dull, right? Or they're like a muscle. And when you exercise it, it gets stronger. When you don't exercise it, it atrophies. And so, anecdotally, I had been hearing for, the last, 8 years or, certainly, that younger people were kind of showing up in the workforce lacking, or their social emotional skills were not as well developed as in previous generations. And there's now data on that as well. And I can't remember the study who did it, but it came out like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago maybe. And it was all survey based, but of recruiters who said that it was, some really high percentage of applicants for jobs, they come up for the interview, could not make eye contact. And that's the first step. I mean, when we talk about social brain network, like my brain makes an inference about what's important based on what you're looking at. If you're not looking at me, right, that tells me I'm not important. And then we also fail to begin to build that synchrony, which is the foundation of trust and communication.
You are at the world's best business school, arguably. Right. They always trade places.
Yeah, you get rated very highly.
And
by other measures of data.
So you're teaching,
Yeah.
Weekly, daily, and working with researchers. You're working with and teaching the future.
Yes.
Of our world.
Yes.
Right. I wouldn't just say like America, because these
they're from everywhere.
Are people from everywhere, and they're going to go back to their homeland. I have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
What keeps you up at night? Okay. What is exciting you from a hopeful standpoint?
Yeah.
And then if you had the opportunity to sort of give advice to that large group of people we might call the future leaders, the future generation of our world, what would that be?
Those
So
are such easy questions.
yeah, so easy. All right, let's start with what keeps you
What
up
keeps
at
me
night?
up at night? Yeah, it's AI right now.
Okay.
So it is, something, and I think I'm not the only one. It's changing, it's improving.
Because you're using it and you can't fall asleep.
There's that too. I mean, it's exciting and it's amazing and it's incredible.
Huge double-edged sword.
Yeah, but I believe we're already seeing it. The impacts on labor markets, right? Dislocation, I think they're going to be profound. I mean, that was clear to me when ChatGPT first came out. How could that not be? And some sectors, some jobs are more exposed than others. But that that's going to be potentially huge. And for those who might be unaffected directly, like losing jobs or whole professions kind of being taken over by AI, if you're still remaining, you're going to be working alongside AI or with AI. So that's also another source of fracturing relationships with other humans potentially, because you're spending more time in a screen.
Your new coworker,
yeah, exactly,
may not be human.
It may not be human.
Right.
I think it's already happening. There
Right.
are companies and organizations where there are
That just raises like massive implications based on literally everything we
just talked about. So that is scary, and ultimately we might be setting conditions for a lot of societal upheaval, and it could be really challenging. And getting back to that question of this evolution is not accelerating to keep up. So, and even culture isn't. And so this is happening so fast that our ability to adapt, I think, is, well, we shall see, but it is something that humans have not had to adapt to, that pace and magnitude of change, of expectations for life. I mean, everything, the reordering of society from birth to death.
But I do love
education, everything.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah,
work, life,
the whole thing.
But I do love what you started with, which was that as human evolution sort of inches along, and technological evolution is increasingly a hockey stick.
Yes.
What bridges that gap? If I had a third arm, could very well
be. I
be
think that's what we really need.
Leadership.
We really need leaders for, and that's the message in this book. As well. So that was the first question. The second one,
so that's keeping you up at night.
About, I guess I would say, I mean, I'm excited about all the work we're doing. I think and we're doing some really bleeding edge work where we're actually combining AI and neuroscience to create new kinds of models, which we call a human brain digital twin.
Human brain.
So everybody's talking
digital
about digital twins, which is but it's based purely on, it's like I run this video, this podcast through an AI that's going to pull out all the visual features, what's happening, and all the.
It creates like a replica of you,
and sentiments and text, right? And it can digest that, and essentially create a replica of us and our interactions. What we do is we take that, but we also passive brain data. So we started this in media, like advertising and TV shows and whatnot. You just have people watching this stuff, and then we're trying to predict things like sales, out in the marketplace, and even changes in stock prices and things like that. So, the AI, regular old digital twin, this does it okay, does pretty good. The brain data does better on its own, but when you combine them and create a new model, a new deep neural network model, that is super powerful
from a predictive intelligence
standpoint. Yeah, exactly. So once we had that foundation, we're now deploying that kind of platform for other uses. So in one case, working with a major global financial services company to help them develop a new product, which is essentially a financial companion that lives in your phone that will be personalized so that it doesn't feel like you're banking. It's like your friend, but it's also a financial planner.
Wow.
And it makes you engaged and you feel great and you're getting the daily wins like, oh, I got a Starbucks coffee or whatever, but also feel secure, like peace of mind that things are going to be good for retirement, right? And, because it's going to listen to all your aspirations and, figure you out, create a digital twin of your brain, right? That's what will sort of live in there. And we're doing this
incredible.
applying this in other, you could imagine just sort of lather, rinse, and repeat. A whole variety,
And all sorts of applications.
Create a true human brain digital twin of great leaders, for example. So this will lead me to like, if I'm giving you two answers for each of these questions, but the other one is like, if I put my real optimist hat on, maybe we thread the needle just right. Maybe that actually lets us get back to the basics of life, the things that really matter, like human interaction, human relationships, community, spirituality, I would say is part of that. Because we don't have to do the work, right? I mean, yeah, we derive identity and some pleasure from work, but why don't we like work in the garden together or,
instead of completing our weekly report.
Yeah. Or like, okay, now, you know what, instead I'm going to focus my time and energy on playing music with other people. Or, it's kind of like, the utopia of Star Trek, the original Gene Roddenberry, which is like all needs are taken care of. And so your job is to just be the best you can be. Right. So
that'd be really interesting.
That would be awesome. I don't, I'm trying to wear my optimist hat as much as I can. It's usually not first thing in the morning. Usually it's more of like AI doomer, reading whatever happened, yesterday. Okay. So those are two questions. And the third one
was just, we'd be like, what advice would you give? Imagine you're sitting at Huntsman Hall in front of however many students that will go on to, 10 years from now, be CEOs and leaders in the world. What advice would you give them now?
Yeah. I think that my experience with the students at Wharton, undergrad and MBA, is they kind of get it. Like especially the MBA students, they spend most of their time networking. I think, sure, you could say that that's like, well, I don't know, it's like skeevy somehow because it's just about like knowing who knows who. But if you're doing it really sincerely, and sincerity is a big part of to get the most out of this, health-wise, brain health-wise, et cetera. But, really getting a strong foundation in social emotional skills, that's going to be the key to leadership. It already is, but even more so into the future. Also key to resilience. That is, I think probably the number one cornerstone. We're wired to connect, and that is the key to our resilience as individuals and as a species. Why we're still here on this
certainly
planet.
The case with the monkeys.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the social brain and the social connection, which was the highest correlated feature that determined survival or demise. And
the power of us, united we stand, divided we fall.
Wow. So really, it would be double down on connection.
Yes.
And keep growing that social brain network.
Yes.
And think of it as a muscle. It's not it's a use it or lose it,
Yeah, it is, I think this is, advice to everybody, is like, we're always looking for the easy way out. Take a pill to get, skinny, or to get ripped, or AI to do your work for you. But, you got to do the hard work. Like if
there's
you
no
want
social brain Ozempic.
No, there's no social brain Ozempic. It's like if you want to compete at the highest levels in sport, you're going to have to show up. You're a hockey player, let's say, show up at 5 a.m. or whatever it is.
There's no escaping.
There's no escaping it. You've got to do it. And the same is true for life and for our ability to connect with each other and live with each other and work with each other.
Incredible advice. We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
A lot of ground. And yet we land in a very simple place that arguably would be the answer for hundreds and thousands of years back.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
despite the complexity of our times and the fact that in 2 years from now, there'd probably be robots
Yes,
in this
they'd
room.
be
And
all over.
it's still about exercise that social brain,
Yeah.
establish human connection, and repeat and repeat
Right.
and grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. I love that.
We stuck the landing.
All right.
With the Olympic metaphor.
Thank you so much, Michael. This was a fantastic experience. I feel like we've gone on a journey. And if you haven't had a chance to read The Leader's Brain, this has been updated and expanded. I've just finished the original. Now I got to get this one. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this is yours.
Thank you.
Sign it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take it. No, it's good. And thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here, as always, to get to hang with you, Jonathan.